At the age of 17, I had a crush on someone. My family was poor, and I saved money for a whole year to buy him a birthday gift. The day my mom had an accident, I left school early. Just then, I heard him say to his friend with a smile, "This thing, even the third prize in a restaurant is better than it." His friend laughed loudly and said, "I know Daniel doesn't like it. Otherwise, give it to me. I can sell it and go online a few times. If you want it, here you go." Daniel threw it to him in disgust, and his eyes happened to meet mine later. At the class reunion, I heard that Daniel had been looking for me for 8 years. When my eyes met Daniel's, his expression froze slightly. The male classmate holding the watch scratched his head awkwardly and then said, Should I give it back to you?" I looked at the watch in his hand, which was in a terrible state, clearly not cherished. The watch wasn't expensive, costing about 1,000 yuan. But I had saved for nearly a year. I saved money bit by bit from my meal money. My eyes fell on Daniel's hand. He was wearing a watch today. I couldn't tell what brand it was, but I was sure that the watch on his hand was much better than the one I gave him. I silently took the watch from Daniel's friend's hand, looked at Daniel, and said slowly, Sorry. I'll deal with it myself." Daniel lowered his eyes, pursed his lips, and remained silent. Embarrassed, I rubbed the watch in my hand and turned to leave. When I passed the first trash can at the school gate, I made up my mind and threw the watch into the trash can. I turned my head and took a look at him. He casually lifted his eyelids, with a smile on his lips and full of mockery in his eyes. I was stunned and lowered my eyes. It was so embarrassing, my secret love. At that time, I didn't know that this look from Daniel would almost become my nightmare. When I got home, my dad was sitting at the door, smoking a cheap cigarette, with a worried look on his face. My mom wasn't there. He handed me a report, which said that my mom had breast cancer. My dad took a deep puff of the cigarette and said, "The treatment for breast cancer will cost over 100,000 yuan. Your mom and I discussed not to treat it. Your mom said she wants to eat the braised pork ribs I make. Go and buy the ingredients. I'll pick your mom up later." I didn't believe it. I kept flipping through the report and said in a trembling voice, "Is it confirmed? There are many misdiagnoses. I'll take my mom to see a doctor again tomorrow. This must be a misdiagnosis." I looked at my dad stubbornly. My dad's eyes were red, and he just looked at me without saying a word at that moment. My tears streamed down uncontrollably. Finally, I cried and said, "I won't study anymore. Let's treat mom's illness." My dad lowered his head. I knew that my dad was no less sad than I was. My dad had a disabled right leg, and at that time, only my mom was willing to be with him, not despise him, and always encouraged him. Although our family was poor, my dad and mom loved each other deeply. In junior high school, classmates in the class started to have their own beliefs. I asked my dad, "Dad, what's your belief?" My dad didn't know what belief meant, so I explained it to him roughly. He scratched his head shyly and said, "My belief is your mom." Then I also had my belief. I wanted to grow up, earn money, money, and take my dad and mom to see the world. My dad's belief had collapsed. So had mine. I held my dad's hand and said to myself, "I won't study. I'll go to work. And we'll go to Beijing to treat mom's illness." My dad smoked, saying nothing, but I had already made up my mind. I asked my dad to pick my mom up, and then I packed our things to go to Beijing. I went back to school myself. On the way, it started to rain. Pedestrians on the road were in a hurry, trying to avoid getting caught in the heavy rain. Only then did I dare to cry. The rain and my tears mixed together. When I arrived at school, there were almost no people left. I reached out my hand towards the dirty trash can. The stinky and pungent smell kept rising. I rummaged through it several times, but the watch I threw away wasn't there. I bit my lip, wishing I could slap myself for throwing the watch away. I could have sold it for a few hundred yuan. I searched for hours, turning over every piece of garbage in the trash can, but there was no sign of the watch. Disheartened, I walked home. By then, there were almost no people on the street. The rain was heavy, and it hurt a bit when it hit my body. When I got home, my dad hadn't come back yet. The usually warm home now felt cold to me. I waited and waited. Finally, I only waited for someone to come in a hurry and tell me, "Your dad and mom jumped into the river." That year, I was in my senior year of high school. I lost both my parents and became an orphan. 8 years have passed. And I still can't forget what happened that day. I sat up from the bed, turned on my phone, and found it was only 4 o'clock. I called out softly and plaintively to the empty room. Dad, Mom. As usual, there was no response. I lowered my head. In the past 8 years they never came to see me even once. In my dreams, there was only Daniel with a smile on his lips. His eyes full of mockery, asking me, "Do you have any dignity, Linda?" Every time I shouted that I did, the dream would end. And I couldn't fall asleep again, so I simply got up to pack my things. After numbly holding the funerals for my parents, I left that place. I went to a new city, working while studying. It was really tough to study and work at the same time, but I didn't dare to stop. Once I stopped, I wanted to cry. I went to the hospital, and the doctor said I had moderate depression and needed someone to help me get over that day. But there was no such person after leaving for 8 years. In recent years, I increasingly wanted to go back. I wanted to see the river where my parents jumped. I wanted to jump in and ask why they were so cruel. I was really tired anyway. Since I was going back, I didn't reject those classmates from my class anymore. So when the class monitor asked if I would go to the class reunion, I was the first to say yes. I hadn't spoken in the class group for 8 years, and I had deleted all my classmates, including Daniel. I bought a ticket for the earliest high-speed train. I felt very relaxed in the past 8 years. There was no day that made me feel more relaxed than now. I was enjoying the beautiful scenery outside the window and chatting with the young couple sitting next to me with a smile. The girl said, "Sister, you don't know it was so hard for me to chase him back then. There were so many girls after him, but I persisted for 2 years. Now I'm taking him to meet my parents." "Sister, you look so happy. Are you also going home?" "I think the wind on the way to see parents is sweet." I was silent for a moment, then forced a smile and said, "Yeah. I'm going home too." "Going home? To see my parents?" I said the last part in a very low voice, having fulfilled my obsession. So low that only I could hear it, but this sentence pleased me. I would be seeing my parents soon. I hummed songs all the way. After getting off the high-speed train, I went straight to the place the class monitor had booked when I arrived. Most of the people were already there. As soon as I entered, the room fell silent instantly. I sat down on my own at the place closest to the door. I put away the smile on my face. The class monitor pushed his glasses and broke the silence. "Linda, you're here?" I nodded. Vivian, a girl who used to have a feud with me, made a sarcastic clicking sound and said, "Oh, if it isn't the most difficult to invite top student Linda, just looking at your face makes me lose my appetite. Can someone remind Daniel? He'd better not come today." No one knew the reason why I dropped out of school back then, but they all knew that I liked Daniel and that I gave him a gift. The girl sitting next to Vivian tugged at Vivian. The class monitor also frowned and said, "Cut it out. Daniel has been looking for Linda for 8 years. Telling him she's here will only make him happy." Vivian sneered and said, "Daniel is kind-hearted. Who knew you had to apologize for not liking someone? He's been looking for her for 8 years just to apologize. Is there anything wrong with not liking someone? Everyone knows Linda transferred because Daniel embarrassed her. What you said makes it seem like Daniel likes her. Daniel already has someone he likes, right? I heard that person is a rich and beautiful girl. Besides being good-looking, what does Linda have to be missed for? A disabled father? A home so poor that it's bare-walled? Come on." Vivian's words were getting more and more excessive, and the others all frowned. I stood up. There was no anger on my face. "I'm not here to eat, so you don't have to worry about not being able to eat. I just came to see everyone. Now that I have, I'm leaving." After saying this, I opened the door and walked out. The class monitor chased after me. He grabbed my hand and said with a serious expression, "Daniel really has been looking for you for 8 years. Aren't you going to wait for him?" Daniel's appearance appeared in my mind. He was very handsome, with beautiful eyes, but when he looked at me, his eyes were emotional, and there was a mocking smile on his lips. I shook my head and said with a smile, "I'm in a hurry. If you see him, please say sorry for me. Really. I'm so sorry." The class monitor froze in place. After leaving, I bought a lot of joss paper. I burned a great deal of it in front of my parents' graves. So much that it would be enough for 100 years after burning the paper. I went back home and took a look. Everywhere in the house was covered in dust. I didn't clean it, nor did I touch the things at home. I stayed at the door for a long time. By then, it was completely dark. There were no lights in the countryside. I turned on my phone and saw that it was almost 11 o'clock. I took a taxi to Jinjiang. The Jinjiang River was very calm at night. Occasionally, a few motorcycles passed by on the street. All of them were delivery riders. I was pulling my suitcase and stopped by the bridge. No one paid attention to me because I was pulling a suitcase. They all thought I was tired from walking and was taking a rest by the bridge. I waited until 12 o'clock. No one passed by anymore. I wrote a note on the suitcase, then resolutely climbed over the railing and jumped down. The moment I jumped, I wasn't sure if I heard wrong, but I seemed to hear Daniel's voice. Damn it. Don't jump. Linda. When I lost consciousness, I seemed to see Daniel again. Wearing his high school uniform. Leaning against the corridor lamp railing, his coat was loosely draped over his body, a lollipop in his mouth. His brows were slightly raised. And there was a smile in his eyes as he said, "Yo, if it isn't the study committee member?" In the first year of high school, I had heard of Daniel. The girls in the class would talk about Daniel every day because Daniel was really handsome. He was fair-skinned, with distinct facial features. His eyes were long at the corners, and when he smiled, he had a somewhat alluring charm. Wild and flamboyant. When we were regrouped in the second year of high school, Daniel and I were in the same class, and he sat behind me. During breaks, there was always a crowd around my seat, chattering nonstop. I was not used to having so many people around me. So I would take a full cup of water and pretend to go get some water. In fact, I would hide by the back door. Then I heard them talking about me. What's the homeroom teacher thinking? He clearly knows our Daniel likes beautiful girls, yet the only girl around him is the study committee member. The homeroom teacher is so cruel. Everyone knows how many pretty girls Daniel dated in the first year of high school. Now it's not like he's not allowed to contact girls. He arrests the study committee member. Right? To be honest, Daniel, I've never seen someone as old-fashioned as the study committee member, who still wears small framed glasses these days. Her bangs are thick and long, and she wears the school uniform so neatly she looks just like an old pedant. Daniel, you can't be interested in her, right? After this sentence, there was a burst of laughter. Fuck off. This was what Daniel said. His voice was hoarse from the voice-changing period. But it was nice to hear. Then he sneered and said softly, Daniel, am not that picky. Am I? I was slightly stunned. I looked at my whitish shoes and school pants, and suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. I lowered my head and didn't go back to my seat until they ended the topic. During breaks, my seat never really belonged to me. There were always girls coming to see Daniel. And Daniel was always receptive to them. Later, the school added a swimming class. The swimsuits were ordered, and each set cost $50 before the class ended. The teacher told me, "The study committee member will collect this money." Vivian gave a soft laugh, raised her hand, and asked, Teacher, everyone knows Linda's family is poor. Isn't it inappropriate to give the money to Linda? I clenched my hands tightly. Vivian had disliked me since the first year of high school. I didn't expect that we would be in the same class again after the class division in the second year. To be honest, there was no major feud between Vivian and me. She just looked down on me. Adopting the principle of the less trouble, the better, I was about to tell the teacher to forget it. Just then, a pair of beautiful hands with well-defined joints suddenly stretched out in front of me. "Here you go, study committee member." I looked up and saw Daniel looking down at me. His eyes were extremely beautiful, and I was a bit stunned for a moment. Perhaps I was stunned for a bit too long. The person next to Daniel nudged him and said with a flirtatious smile, "Well, another one is smitten." Hearing this, I came to my senses. But Daniel suddenly leaned closer to me. My pupils dilated. He smiled roguishly and whispered in my ear, "I know I'm handsome, but study committee member, you're not my type." I lowered my eyes, took the money from his hand, then turned my head to meet his gaze, nodded and said softly, "I know." Daniel was taken aback, raised his eyebrows, and said, "Good. Study hard. Study committee member." After that, Daniel straightened up, tossed the basketball, and left the classroom. The other students in the class didn't hear what Daniel and I said. They just thought Daniel seemed to be nice to me. So they all gave me the money. Vivian reluctantly gave me the money and warned me, "Stay away from Daniel. Look at your family's financial situation. You're like a toad trying to eat swan meat." I ignored her, silently collected all the money, and took out my living expenses to pay for the swimsuit. After counting, when I found I had enough money, I rushed to hand it over to the teacher just after school at noon. By the time I finished paying the money, they had almost finished eating. I took out a steamed bun from my bag and started munching on it. In the empty classroom, my mind was full of thoughts about how to find a part-time job to earn living expenses. If I asked my parents for this money, they would surely give it to me, but I didn't want to. When I was halfway through eating, Daniel came in. He was a bit surprised to see me. I just glanced at him and then lowered my eyes to keep eating the steamed bun in silence. Daniel walked straight to his seat. Suddenly, he poked me and said in a hoarse voice, "Have you finished eating, study committee member?" I looked at the 2-bite left steamed bun, stuffed it into my mouth, turned my head, and nodded silently. He turned sideways and lifted up his school uniform. There was a large patch of abrasions on his waist, still oozing blood. He tilted his head and smiled at me. "Can you help me apply some medicine?" I quickly chewed the steamed bun in my mouth, nodded, and said softly, "Okay." I walked over and squatted down beside him, rummaged through my pocket for the medicine, and frowned, asking, "Why didn't you buy iodine? Alcohol will hurt a lot." Daniel gave a soft laugh. A real man is never afraid of pain. As soon as Daniel finished speaking, I dipped a cotton ball in alcohol and wiped his wound. Hiss. I looked up at Daniel and retorted, "A real man." Daniel looked down at me, was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, "Study committee member, your eyelashes are really long." His tone was extremely casual. I knew very well that Daniel was just saying it casually. I lowered my eyes, but my hands pressed harder. Daniel didn't make a sound, but his abdominal muscles were stiff, which was enough to show that he was in pain. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "It really hurts. Be gentle." My hand paused, and I subconsciously blew gently on the wound. After blowing, I was stunned, and so was Daniel. Then neither of us spoke again. After applying medicine to Daniel, our relationship remained like that of strangers during breaks. I could even see him sending other girls back to the dormitory. There was a big tree in front of our dormitory. Daniel and the girl were standing under the big tree. The girl was very good looking. She was a senior from the 3rd year of high school. She stood on tiptoe, pouted her lips towards Daniel. When Daniel bent down, he suddenly looked in my direction. I quickly turned my head away. Daniel shifted his gaze, bent down, pinched the girl's face, and left with a smile. For some reason, I always paid a bit more attention to Daniel. Lying on the dormitory bed, I thought about it and finally came to the conclusion that I liked his face. Just looking at it was good enough. Later, when I happened to see Daniel walking with other girls, I would quickly walk to a place where I couldn't see Daniel, or I would walk far behind, not even raising my head. I thought this way I wouldn't offend Daniel. The next time Daniel got injured, he came to me with the medicine. This time it was his arm. He propped one hand on the desk, raised his injured arm towards me, and winked, saying, "Study committee member." Just as I picked up the bag, I saw the senior from the 3rd year of high school coming. I suddenly stood up from my seat, and my head hit Daniel's chin. Hiss said, "Study committee member, if you want me dead, you don't have to hit me with your head. What if I become stupid?" As he spoke, he reached out his hand towards my head. I leaned back to avoid Daniel's hand. Seeing the senior's figure getting closer, I quickly bowed to Daniel and then ran away. Daniel stayed where he was, his expression a bit gloomy and hard to read. The swimsuits arrived. The first class in the afternoon was a swimming class. Everyone changed into swimsuits. I had never worn such revealing clothes before, so I put on a coat over the swimsuit. "Hey! Holy shit! Daniel has long legs." Hearing this voice, I turned my head to look around. Then the voice sounded again, full of surprise, "Holy crap! It's actually the study committee member." Only then did I realize they were talking about me. I nervously tugged at my clothes. My eyes met Daniel's. Subconsciously, I gave Daniel a once-over. The swimsuit was tight, outlining his well-defined abdominal muscle. She had broad shoulders and a narrow waist. A typical inverted triangle figure. But he looked a bit annoyed. I lowered my head, of course. Daniel didn't like me. And he probably didn't like me looking at him either. When we gathered, the teacher frowned when seeing me wearing glasses and said, "Haven't you gone to get prescription swimming goggles? How can you swim like this? Don't you have any common sense?" Vivian laughed and said, Teacher, you're really right. Her father is lame, and her mother didn't even finish primary school. Their family is so poor that they may not even be able to fill their stomachs. Teacher, how could she know that you need to wear swimming goggles for swimming? Vivian seemed to be explaining for me. But in fact, she revealed my family situation in detail. The teacher looked surprised, then was silent for a moment and said dryly, "Well, if your myopia isn't too severe, you can just take off your glasses." Vivian raised her hand again. Teacher, she's a top student. He reads books every day. How can her myopia not be severe? At this time, Daniel impatiently clicked his tongue and said, "Are you the only one who has a mouth? Aren't you noisy?" Vivian's face turned red with embarrassment, but she didn't dare to retort. She just shut up and lowered her head. The teacher didn't mention this matter anymore. I took off my glasses when getting into the water because of my high myopia. I stayed by myself. Afraid of bumping into someone despite my fear, I still bumped into someone while practicing without glasses. I couldn't even open my eyes in the water, so when I came out of the water, the first thing I saw was a set of abdominal muscles. I quickly apologized. "Sorry, are you okay?" After apologizing, I moved my gaze upward to see who it was. My eyes met a face with a half smile. "Study committee member?" My eyes widened, and my feet slipped, causing me to sink into the water. Just then, a hand pulled me up. I gasped for breath, looking at the blurry figure of Daniel in front of me, my chest heaving. Daniel moved closer, carefully examining my face. Then smiled and said, "Study committee member. Do you have some strange aesthetic quirks?" "What do you mean?" "It means," Daniel leaned down and whispered in my ear, "I take back what I said about you not being my type." I was stunned, and my ears quickly turned red until my whole face was burning with embarrassment. I broke free from his hand and swam towards the shore in a panic, and put on my glasses, which gave me a sense of security, and let out a long sigh. I scanned around, and Daniel was no longer in the swimming pool. The blush on my face gradually faded, and my heartbeat returned to normal. "Don't believe it, Daniel is just teasing you." I warned my past self, but she couldn't hear me. And I woke up. I looked around the room. It was very simple. With only a computer desk, an esports chair, and a computer. My clothes had been changed. Didn't die, huh? I forced a bitter smile and walked out of the room groggily. I saw a girl leaning on the sofa, watching TV. When she was happy, she casually picked up an apple from the table and took a bite. It seemed this should be her home, and maybe she was the one who saved me. I was just about to thank her when she frowned, stood up, and her expression instantly turned bad. She snapped at me, "Who are you? Why are you in Daniel's house?" I was stunned. "What did she say?" "She said this was Daniel's house." Seeing me stunned, she crossed her arms and walked up to me. "Hey, come down to me. I'm asking you a question. Why are you in Daniel's house and still sleeping in his room?" The girl's face looked very ugly, showing possessive eyes. I lowered my eyes and said, "I don't know him. He saved me. You Ray, his girlfriend, right? Please thank him for me. I'll leave now." "You'd better leave quickly." I walked towards the suitcase in the corner. When going out, I wasn't paying attention and bumped into someone. It was very hard, and it hurt my head. I covered my forehead, looked up to apologize, and when I saw Daniel's face clearly, my pupils dilated, and my steps involuntarily retreated to steps. Daniel hadn't changed much. The only difference was that he had lost his youthful air and became more mature and charming. He was carrying groceries in his hand. His eyes moved to my hand pulling the suitcase, and he sneered, "What? Going to jump into the river again?" I looked at Daniel. This time, I didn't avoid his gaze and said softly, "Daniel, am I in your way?" Hearing this, Daniel's expression froze for a moment. After coming to his senses, he asked, "Linda, want to have a meal?" I shook my head. "No. I'm in a hurry." Daniel lowered his eyes. and his hand holding the groceries tightened. Can't you stop trying to die? I looked up at Daniel seriously and said, you shouldn't have saved me. I just also want to have a home. Daniel's eyes lit up. Then I added, a home while my parents are, although my father is lame and my mother is ill, the family you would never want to encounter is what I dream of day and night. Daniel fell silent. I walked towards the door, and Daniel suddenly grabbed my arm and said, Linda, I'm getting married. I paused, let out a soft sigh. Really? Congratulations then. Will you come to my wedding? Daniel turned to look at me. Those eyes were the same as before. Extremely charming. Is my presence what makes your wedding perfect? I asked. Daniel looked at me for a long time. Then his thin lips parted and he said one word. Yes. I smiled at him, my tone brisk. Then I'll come. I won't leave you with any regrets. When is it? In a month. Okay. I agreed to Daniel and rented a house here for a month. In high school, I thought Daniel liked me too. So I saved money for a long time to buy him a watch, but it turned out that it was just my wishful thinking. It was an embarrassing secret love. Now that Daniel is getting married, I will personally draw a full stop to my youthful secret love and this chapter of my life. The next day in the middle of the night, Daniel knocked on my door. When I opened it, a strong smell of alcohol hit me. It was raining, and he was soaked through. Daniel hugged me tightly, burying his head in my neck. Instantly, I felt a large area of my neck get wet. Daniel turned his head and whispered in my ear, Linda, I've been looking for you for 8 years. You didn't reveal any information at all. Do you hate me? Daniel's tone was a bit aggrieved and his words were a bit slurred. I turned my head and said, Daniel, you're drunk. Daniel straightened up and took out a watch. I was slightly startled. This was the watch I had thrown into the trash can back then. I found it. Don't he throw it away again? I lowered my head and said softly, it's not something valuable. Don't keep it. Daniel's breathing became slightly heavy suddenly. He pinched my chin, forcing me to raise my head. A strong sense of possessiveness flashed in his eyes the next moment. His kiss landed heavily, and his voice was hoarse, accompanied by slurred words, Linda, I regret it. I shouldn't have been jealous. My eyes widened. As I was about to step back, Daniel's hand around my waist tightened, forcefully holding me in place so that I couldn't retreat until I was pressed against him. Daniel's stunned pried open my teeth and probed in forcefully. His hands imprisoned me, leaving me no room to shrink back. Bit by bit, he made me filled with the smell of alcohol. Hot and burning. The kiss I had thought about for a long time in high school finally happened at this moment. I looked at Daniel expressionlessly, then suddenly smiled and said, Daniel, sleep with me. How can a person just take without giving? In high school, you teased me as if you were watching a performing monkey. Even a monkey gets tired. You have to give it some sweeteners for it to keep performing. What do you think, Daniel? Daniel frowned, reached out to stroke the stray hairs on my cheek, and said softly, Linda, you're not welcome with me to see a doctor tomorrow, okay? Daniel's tone was extremely gentle. I tilted my head and saw the girl following behind Daniel. It was raining, and she just stood there quietly behind Daniel. At that time, I felt a bit unfamiliar with her, but now I remembered she and Daniel were from the same world. They grew up together. However, she didn't know me and wasn't aware of all the girls related to Daniel ever since the swimming class. Daniel seemed to have flipped some switch and always loved to tease me. When I was doing exercises, Daniel leaned against the window and snatched the workbook from my hand, teasing, Study committee member. Still studying, I stammered. There's an exam coming up. The person next to us laughed and said, Daniel, why do you always tease the study committee member? Muck, you've made her nervous. Daniel raised his eyebrows and leaned closer to look at my face, saying as he looked, let me take a look. I kept my head down all the time when playing basketball. Daniel refused the water given by other girls and said with a smile, sorry. The study committee member of our class brought water for me. How could I have brought him water? After hearing that, I ran to buy water for him. Later, during the sports meeting, Daniel brought a girl. During that time, Daniel didn't even give me a glance. I saw him coaxing that girl. My little princess, where can I find an umbrella for you? Isn't it okay to get a little sun? that girl was fair-skinned and very pretty. I silently handed over my umbrella. The girl didn't even look at me and said, "It's so ugly. I won't use it. Whoever wants it can take it." Daniel threw the umbrella back to me and said, all right. If you don't want it, you don't have to use it. I won't play basketball anymore, okay? Then you won't get sunburned, princess." This was the first time I saw Daniel coaxing someone. "Linda." Daniel called me. I came back to my senses and nodded at him distantly. "I'll go see a doctor. I promise I'll be healthy before your wedding." "Daniel, don't worry. I won't ruin your wedding, please rest assured. You can leave now." Daniel was already at the door. I just closed the door, separating Daniel and the girl. Daniel knocked on the door, shouting, having fulfilled my obsession. Linda. Then I heard the girl's voice, but couldn't make out what she said. Daniel didn't knock on the door anymore. I took a few pills and lay down on the bed suddenly. I dreamed of my parents. During the summer vacation of my sophomore year in high school, our family was harvesting grain. Vivian, to embarrass me, called most of the classmates in the class to help with the harvest. My father and mother took out the best food to entertain them. My parents didn't notice the look of disgust in their eyes, but I did. Daniel was the first to speak. "Uncle, this fish is delicious. Is it wild?" My father nodded with a smile. "Yes, there are a lot in the river. I still have a few in the tank. You can take them back to eat." Daniel ate happily and then went to help with the grain harvest. After finishing, he didn't know how to do it, so I taught him. He pinched my face with a smile and said, "Linda, you know so many things." Then he started working silently. After a while, the others couldn't take it anymore and started doing other things. Seeing this, I ran to the grocery store and bought a big bag of popsicles. I took them back and distributed them to everyone. Vivian crossed her arms and said, "We're working for you. You should at least treat us to something better. You're so shameless to take out such cheap popsicles." I paused and said, "These are good for quenching thirst." Throughout the process, Daniel did the most work. My father kept praising him. The others left one by one, and only Daniel worked until it was dark. When it was dark, the road was difficult to walk on. My father said, "Young man, stay for the night. I'll ask Linda to make a bed for you." My room was on the second floor, and Daniel made a makeshift bed on the second floor balcony. The house wasn't soundproof, and I could hear Daniel tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. So I lit a mosquito-repellent incense and took it to him. As soon as I reached his side, he opened his eyes and said with a smile, "What? Does the study committee member want to do something to me while I'm asleep?" I put down the mosquito-repellent incense, squatted down, and asked softly, "Does it hurt?" Daniel was pampered. When had he ever done farm work? Even if he didn't say anything, I knew he must be in pain. In the dark, I couldn't see Daniel's expression clearly. He was silent for a while and then said in a hoarse voice, "It does hurt." I put my hand on his arm. "I'll rub it for you. I'll feel better when it's needed loose." I silently rubbed Daniel's arm and felt his body temperature getting higher and higher. I asked, "Are you hot?" He coughed lightly twice and said, "Not." He study committee member really knows how to rub. I feel much better. After a moment of silence, I thanked him. "Daniel, thank you so much today. If it weren't for you, my parents and I would have to spend many more days harvesting." Suddenly, Daniel put one hand on the back of my head and pressed me down a bit. All I could clearly see were his eyes, blazing with heat. He asked, "Can I have a kiss?" I was stunned, but then I nodded. After I nodded, it was Daniel's turn to be stunned. He let go of his hand and said, "I was just kidding." I didn't stop the movement of my hands and just let out into him. When the senior year of high school started, Daniel became a bit colder towards me. At that time, I was already saving money. I thought I could repay Daniel for his help. Because I had good grades, there were often people coming to ask me questions. One of them was Robert. He could come to me 7 or 8 times a day. When Daniel passed by, he said with a sarcastic smile, "Robert, are you treating the study committee member as a free teacher?" Then he bent down and looked at me. "Linda, you think you can get rich this way?" His tone was rather sarcastic. I frowned, not knowing what I had done to offend him, but I didn't say anything. It was not until I gave Daniel the watch that I had saved for a long time. When I left school early that day and heard Daniel's words, I finally understood that Daniel seemingly had never thought highly of me. He treated me like a cat or a dog, teasing me when he was happy and leaving me alone when he wasn't. There was no real affection at all. After getting up, I went to the hospital. The doctor asked me, "What's the situation?" I said, "I was previously diagnosed with moderate depression." The doctor let out a long sigh and said, "Moderate, it's still controllable. Let's do another examination." I nodded and took the examination form. But halfway through, I suddenly changed my mind and left. As soon as I walked out of the hospital, I ran into Daniel, who was waiting at the hospital entrance. He walked towards me and asked, "Did you have the examination? What kind of medicine did they prescribe?" I was a bit annoyed, but still smiled and lied, "I did everything the doctor said. I'm in great condition." Daniel frowned. "Linda, you know when you lie, your eyes are unusually focused." I put away my smile, looked up, and asked, "Daniel, do you like me? Does your girlfriend know you're so concerned about me?" I wasn't afraid that Daniel would mock me for asking this question, but what Daniel said was beyond my expectation. He took out a cigarette, lit it, took a puff, and smiled. "Yeah, I like you." Daniel's words exploded in my ears. I was only shocked for a second, then smiled and said, "I don't like you, Daniel. I'm chasing you." Daniel stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. "Then come and die with me, Daniel." I stood there waiting for Daniel's answer. He looked at me for so long that I lost my patience. Just as I turned my head, Daniel's voice came from behind. He said, "Okay." Then he grabbed my hand and asked, "How do you want to die? By jumping into the river or off a building?" I fell silent. "You're going to get married, Daniel." But Daniel seemed determined. He sneered, "The wedding was originally a lie to keep you." "What wedding? Who am I going to marry? What about that girl?" "You mean Luna?" Daniel asked. I nodded. "So that girl's name was Luna." Daniel rubbed his temples. "She's my brother's girlfriend. It wouldn't be good for me to snatch her, right?" "That girl was Daniel's brother's girlfriend? But you clearly treated her." I didn't finish my sentence. Daniel just smiled. "Of course I had to treat her well. Otherwise, my brother would really beat me up. Since we're talking about it, I might as well tell you everything. She came to me last night to persuade me, and back then, I said those things because I was jealous. The gift you gave, it was great." I felt a bit dazed, as if I saw the high school Daniel smiling at me and saying, "Study committee member, this watch is really nice." After everything was out in the open, the barrier in my heart should have been broken, but I still felt very depressed. I pushed Daniel away and said seriously, "But the Linda now is not the Linda back, and you can leave." Daniel didn't leave. Instead, he followed me closely. I was a bit impatient. "You're going to delay me from finding a boyfriend." I just wanted Daniel to leave me alone. The idea of a boyfriend was just an excuse. But Daniel still stubbornly followed me. "Linda, wouldn't it be nice if I served you together with him?" My face turned a bit red. Then I sneered. "Do you still have ABS? What can you compete with him with? Your thick skin." Daniel lifted his clothes, grabbed my hand, and forced it to touch his ABS, moving it up and down. He said hoarsely, "Do I touch more?" I tried to pull my hand back, but Daniel wouldn't allow it. He even pulled my hand lower. He smiled at me and whispered in my ear, "I've wanted to do this since the first time we swam." Daniel's shamelessness was increasing day by day. He accompanied me every day and took me to many out-of-the-way places, but there was one thing in common: they were all places of worship. "Since when did you believe in these?" "I believe in a lot of things." He grinned and said, Yeah. I hope they all bless you." I was stunned. Daniel pestered me like this for a year, and I finally gave in. We quickly got married. Daniel's parents didn't care at all. Daniel smiled and said to me, "I'm used to it. From childhood to adulthood, they've never cared about my brother and me. As long as they give us some money and food, that's enough." Only then did I know that Daniel's parents had a very bad relationship. Daniel's father had a mistress outside, and his mother also had her own lover. Their marriage was already in name only. If it weren't for the company, they would have divorced long ago. Fortunately, Daniel still had his brother. Later, I spent every day happily with Daniel. I laughed a lot, but I knew my illness actually hadn't gotten better. I secretly went for an examination once. The doctor said it was severe depression and had been like this for some time. I had severe somatic symptoms, but I hid it all from Daniel. It was not until I unconsciously swallowed a large amount of sleeping pills and woke up that I saw Daniel, with red-rimmed eyes. Guarding by my bedside, he rubbed against my hand. "Linda, you're not allowed to die." When Daniel went out to buy me food, Luna came. She looked at me, clenched her fists, and let out a soft scoff. "Linda, do you know that Daniel's older brother died when he was in his senior year of high school? Even if you feel sorry for Daniel, can you stop trying to die?" "He never said that," I said softly. Luna turned her head away. "He's thinking about you. He doesn't want you to pity him. He wants to heal you, but who's going to heal him? He's always so stupid." At this moment, there was love in Luna's eyes. Luna had fallen in love with Daniel. I looked at her. "You'll heal him, right?" Luna's expression turned solemn. She looked into my eyes seriously and said, "If I could. In these 8 years, you would have been out of the picture long ago. He only sees me as his sister-in-law, Linda. He can't live without you." After hearing Luna's words, I tried my best to receive treatment. At first, the effect wasn't obvious. Daniel knew this, but he didn't say anything. Late at night, after Daniel tested whether I was sound asleep, he kissed my forehead and said, "Linda, if it's too hard, you can leave. I'll come and be with you." My eyelashes fluttering nervously, Daniel hugged me, stroking my back over and over to comfort me. That night, it seemed that both Daniel and I had made up our minds. If it was really that painful, then we would die together when everything was ready. I suddenly started vomiting violently. After going to the hospital for an examination, the report showed that I was pregnant, and the fetus was already 4 weeks old. I was stunned, and so was Daniel at this moment. The barrier in my heart seemed to break suddenly. I turned my head and smiled at Daniel. We held hands and went home in the sunset. Daniel excitedly touched my belly and then said, "Shall we go fishing and eat fish, Linda?" I seemed to see my father smiling and talking, and my mother listening tenderly. I nodded and said softly, "Okay."